5 years earlier, dungeons suddenly appeared across the entire world, and with them came endless waves of monsters in a disaster later called the Stampede. Now, 5 years later, Sapporo is home to Hokkaido's biggest dungeon, Chikaho, sitting just outside Odori Park. The place is packed with people, and in the crowd, an adventurer accidentally crashes into Karaboshi Haruki, a 27-year-old rookie adventurer. Chikaho has always been crowded, but lately it feels even worse, and Haruki, who isn't well known, leaves that day without earning any loot. After the chaos that followed the dungeon outbreak, Japan's government created the adventurer profession, allowing qualified people to enter dungeons and fight monsters at the risk of their lives. Haruki knows he has to push himself harder, especially when he sees on his phone that some people use their adventuring background to get better jobs. Former adventurers often sell themselves as tough, confident, and able to survive harsh conditions, qualities companies love. Suddenly, the crowd rushes towards someone famous, Tatsun, as excited girls gather around him, praising his popular blog. Haruki checks his own blog with only 4 views and quietly wonders why no one ever reads his posts. Later, while driving home, he notices how the roads have improved, thinking about how the area was once nearly destroyed. Tired, he opens his garage door and is shocked to find a staircase leading deep underground. He stares at the hole in shock, first thinking it might be a sinkhole, until he realizes it is actually a dungeon entrance. He can't understand how or why a dungeon appeared inside his garage, and his thoughts stop when he notices his snowplow machine completely wrecked in the corner. That machine cost him 3,000 yen, money he earned through hard work, and before buying it, he used to shovel snow by hand every single morning. As winter approaches, he wonders sadly if he will have to go back to that exhausting routine. While kneeling on the floor, mourning his broken snowplow, he notices a strange screen nearby and picks it up out of curiosity. There is a button on it, and when he presses it, a blinding light explodes from the screen and slams into his body. Panic fills his mind as he fears something foreign has entered him and desperately wants it out. Suddenly, a floating screen appears, showing his name, age, and skill points, and he realizes it is a skill board. Moments later, loud engine sounds echo outside as army vehicles arrive, alerted by Karaboshi's report. The soldiers talk among themselves, confirming this is the house where a dungeon formed in the garage, and ask to speak to the landlord. Haruki greets them, but they ignore him and continue discussing their next steps, saying they should contact the landlord. He speaks up again, louder this time, and they finally freeze in surprise, wondering where he came from since they hadn't noticed him at all. Haruki feels a familiar embarrassment, realizing this is how his life has always been, invisible to others. He once believed becoming an adventurer would make him stand out, but that hope never came true. Even back in school, most classmates barely remembered him, and teachers often passed him by without notice. One of the soldiers apologizes and asks to see his license, and Haruki quickly hands it over, hoping the uncomfortable moment will end soon. Deep down, Karaboshi believes that someday he will become someone impossible to overlook. The army confirms that he never entered the dungeon, and he agrees, which eases their worries since it means they can secure the area safely. Barricades, sandbags, and barbed wire are quickly placed around the garage entrance, and Haruki watches in awe at how fast they work. When he compliments them, they casually reply that speed is part of the job. An officer asks if he lost anything, and Haruki admits his snowplow was destroyed, earning sympathetic reactions from the group. After finishing their setup, the soldiers prepare to leave, and Haruki thanks them, mentioning he plans to train, which earns him a warning to stay cautious. As they drive off, one officer salutes him, leaving Haruki confused about the gesture, especially given his flashy shirt. Once they are gone, he straightens up with determination, steps into the dungeon, places a hand on his chest, and summons the screen again, realizing it only appears inside, where magic items can be gained from chests or defeated monsters. These items carry strange powers that go far beyond normal human logic. Staring at the floating screen, he wonders if there is some kind of guide and starts pressing buttons until he notices a letter H, guessing it stands for beginner, while A or S might be the top ranks. He figures skill points can be used to upgrade items or abilities, and another screen pops up showing stats like vitality, strength, dexterity, and technique, just like a game's skill tree. When he checks his stealth stat, he realizes his uneasy feeling was right, since it is already nearly maxed out. His eyes move to a section called Special, and at first he thinks it might mean a hobby or personality trait, until he notices something labeled Growth Rate. The explanation says that the more power he gains from defeating monsters, the faster he will grow, and without much thought, he pours all his points into it. Regret hits him almost instantly, making him wonder if he should have spread his points into safer skills. But after failing to find a reset option, he stands up and moves on. He walks down the dungeon stairs and arrives in a huge cave, amazed by how wide and bright it is, even wondering if the walls themselves are glowing. To test it, he stabs the wall with his dagger and finds it feels like clay, but is far tougher than expected, only cracking and collapsing slightly. At that moment, he spots a large insect crawling toward him, and the screen identifies it as a giant centipede, a beginner-level monster that moves slowly with long antennae stretching from its head. Karaboshi remembers that the centipede uses its antenna to sense everything around it, so if he cuts them off, it won't be able to aim properly, and he can finish it by crushing its head. He rushes forward with sharp movements, confused about why the monster was labeled slow, while reminding himself to stay calm and trust the plan. He slices off the antenna first, then tries to attack its body, only to find its skin is far thicker than expected. The centipede suddenly lunges, and he narrowly dodges, realizing it is faster than he thought, but still manageable. He strikes again at the same spot, driving his dagger straight into its head until it splits open, and the creature collapses, bleeding out until it stops moving. Breathing heavily, Karaboshi drops to the ground, exhausted after his first real monster fight. Knowing more monsters could appear, he forces himself up and decides to collect what he can, but a strange feeling rises in his stomach, and he throws up, wondering if this is level-up sickness or an effect of his growth rate. Shaking it off, he begins cutting off the centipede's legs, gaining a large amount of experience and thinking the shell might work as armor. When he finishes, he studies the remains, realizing the material could be made into full armor or sold for good money. But when he tries to carry it, he quickly sees it won't fit into his bag. He looks over what remains of the body and stares at the soft flesh inside, wondering if it can be eaten. He recalls scholars saying monsters are divided into two types, edible and inedible, so he cuts a piece with his knife, puts it in his mouth, and chews. The meat is tough, has no smell, and no taste at all, and he forces it down with water, realizing it's not poisonous, just pointless to eat. Ever since dungeons appeared, oil prices have gone up and food shortages have spread, to the point where even vegetables are considered luxury items. Thinking about that, he figures that in an emergency, centipede meat might still be better than starving. Afterward, he climbs back up to his house and opens his laptop to visit the adventurer website known as Naru. While browsing, he learns that just visiting the site improves survival rates for beginners like him. The site has a wiki with monster data, attack patterns, and harvesting tips, along with message boards and daily updated blogs. Since having a dungeon appear at home is rare, he decides to post about it on his own blog, convinced this will finally make him popular. An hour passes with almost no change, and he starts doubting whether the internet can really make him famous, especially with over 1 million users ignoring his posts. He even wonders if his view counter is broken, because he doesn't think his writing is worse than the top blogs, yet no one notices it, just as he sees that Bacon-san has already updated his blog again. On Noru, adventurers who reach the top in both views and influence are known as rankers, and gaining that title comes with big benefits like free gear from companies and money earned through collaboration deals. One famous ranker is Bacon-san, a well-loved figure who spends his free time teaching beginners and is known by nicknames such as Muscle, Old Man, and Naked. He prefers to explore dungeons at his own relaxed pace, caring more about having fun than being efficient, yet his strength and skill are unquestionably real. On the complete opposite side is Masatsugu-san, a ranker who is extremely serious, calm, and precise, earning titles like the Strategist, the Hero, and the Unwavering Ranker. He holds the record for diving the deepest into Japan's toughest dungeon, Shinjuku Station. Shiger-san is the only woman among the top 10 rankers, having trained at a dojo since she was young and never losing a single fight. Everyone feels incredible, everyone seems impressive and cool, yet he feels like the only one who isn't, and he can't help but wonder why. Pushing those thoughts aside, he tells himself there's no time to feel depressed, because his garage has become a dungeon, and he now owns magical tools that will surely make him stronger. Determined to overcome his inner doubts, he returns to the dungeon and begins killing centipedes with the skill of a seasoned adventurer. Having already defeated more than 100, a small sense of guilt lingers, as it almost feels like he's bullying them, and he has grown used to the uncomfortable feeling that comes with leveling up. As he continues deeper, he carefully maps the dungeon, though he hasn't even finished charting the first floor yet. When several centipedes appear at once, he moves forward calmly, killing them one by one with smooth, fast motions, cleanly cutting off their heads, showing how much faster and more efficient he has become. Just the day before, he could barely fight one monster and ended up gasping for air. Now, it feels like he's moving with a completely different body, and it's all thanks to his growth rate. Back in Chicago, there was intense competition everywhere, but here, in only a few days by himself, he has already defeated more than 200 monsters. Even though his growth is happening at an unbelievable pace, it still doesn't feel fully real to him. His base strength feels almost maxed out, and he realizes there's no longer a need to train the basics. This makes him wonder if it's time to switch to a new weapon. When he checks his screen, he sees that there's no boss monster on this floor, and even though his skill points haven't gone up yet, he knows they will sooner or later. He decides to head down to the second floor. The terrain feels nearly identical, and he remembers hearing that dungeon layouts don't change much until the 10th floor. The deeper someone goes, the harder the dungeon becomes, and only around 10% of adventurers ever make it to the 10th floor, known as the middle levels. Because adventurers usually work alone, information about higher floors is often purposely hidden online to limit competition. The site also explains that dungeon floors grow exponentially larger the deeper one descends. As he walks through the second floor, wondering what kinds of monsters might be waiting further below, he suddenly hears a cracking sound. Without warning, plant-like creatures burst from the ground, shaped like onions with roots and leaves. Curious, he picks one up, but the moment it splits open, tears instantly fill his eyes. The onions are unbelievably fresh, and he can't stop crying. Deciding that this is enough for today, he heads back home with the onions in hand. There are plenty of them, and in times like these, vegetables grown from monsters could easily be taken over and controlled, at least in Otama. He ends up harvesting far too many onions with his dagger, pushing it until the blade finally snaps. Letting out a tired sigh, he decides he will stop by the weapon shop tomorrow. Around the same time, a young girl behind a counter sighs as well, saying she's bored while wondering if she can meet today's sales quota, as she works as a cashier at a weapon shop. Meanwhile, Karaboshi is enjoying the almost heavenly taste of eggs at Kitora-san's house, finding them far better than centipede meat. Kitora-san smiles warmly as he watches him eat, while 3 crates filled with onions sit stacked inside the house. Looking at them, Kitora-san hesitates and asks if it's really okay to receive so many fresh onions, but Haruki quickly insists he accept them as thanks for always helping him, reminding him that neighbors should support each other. As Kitora-san examines the onions, old memories resurface, reminding him of picking onions like these long ago with his wife before she was killed by a monster. Just touching them brings back the painful memory of how she walked ahead of him in the dungeon and was suddenly attacked, and how deeply he still misses her. Sensing the sudden silence, Haruki stops eating and quietly listens, then stands up to leave and apologizes for causing trouble. Kitora-san reassures him that it's fine, thanks him for stopping by, and asks if he plans to go adventuring again. Sitting in his car, Haruki answers that he does, but before that, there's one place he needs to visit, and soon after, he arrives at the guild and begins placing centipede hard shells on the counter. The girl behind it stares in confusion, wondering what these strange items are and where they came from, as he calmly asks her to appraise them. She stares at the huge pile in disbelief and asks how he managed to bring all of this in by himself. With a hint of pride, he tells her there are 200 pieces, and she repeats the number in shock before asking if they all belong to him. He calmly confirms that they do, and she asks him to wait while she finishes the appraisal. A short while later, she calls his name and explains that the count comes to 216 shells in total. The ones without scratches are valued at 1,000 yen each, while the damaged ones are worth 100 yen each, and she asks if he's okay with the price, adding that the money will be sent directly to his Ike card. When he sees the total amount of 153,800 yen, his eyes widen in disbelief at how much he earned. After thanking her, he adds his narrow points and realizes his total is now 161,460 yen, silently thanking the centipedes for it all. At last, he has enough money for gasoline, and with his next stop decided, he heads to the weapon shop. The moment he steps inside, his eyes light up at the sight of countless daggers, armor sets, shields, and swords lining the walls, and he walks around excitedly like a child. His attention stops on a long sword, thinking it's a reliable choice that would make him look like a proper adventurer. But then he imagines how much attention he'd get fighting monsters with just a dagger. That thought excites him more, and he heads to the dagger section. carefully inspecting each weapon until one stands out. The werewolf dagger, priced at 1 million yen, which feels about right for a mid-level adventurer. Just then, the shopgirl walks over and greets him with a friendly smile. She stands beside him, looking over the daggers, and asks if he's interested in that one, offering to open the case for him. He feels embarrassed right away, wondering why anyone even noticed him, and his nerves feel stronger than when he was fighting monsters. Still, deep down, he feels happy, because someone finally paid attention to him. After opening the case, the girl tells him he can touch and examine the weapons freely. He steps closer and carefully grabs the werewolf dagger that first caught his interest, but no matter how hard he tries, he can't lift it. She explains that weapons made from dungeon materials choose who can use them. He starts thinking it might be about compatibility, like how a mid-level adventurer can't handle high-level monsters. The shop girl then suggests he try the beginner weapons instead, explaining that while they are still pricey, their performance is very reliable. He moves to that section and finds that he can lift one of the daggers without trouble. When he pulls it from its sheath, it feels a bit heavy, but comfortable in his hand. The girl tells him it's called the Silver Wolf Dagger. As Karaboshi gives it a light swing, she smiles and says it looks like he can equip it properly, and they walk toward the register. He asks if she's not allowed to sell weapons people can't use, and she explains that many customers buy based on looks or price, then come back angry when they realize they can't handle them. He says that sounds rough, but she reassures him, joking that she made sure to let him feel a little pain first before choosing. Karaboshi goes quiet, and she cheerfully adds that if he tried to return it, his facial expression would change real fast. He gives an awkward smile and says he has no plans to return it. She then asks if he is a mid-level adventurer, and he quickly answers that he isn't, explaining that he only started not long ago. Hearing this, she begins checking his armor and points out that his leather gear is badly worn down. Feeling embarrassed by how close she is, Karaboshi admits that he's still inexperienced and untalented. She keeps inspecting the armor, counting the scratches, and then suddenly jumps onto the counter with surprising agility, bringing her face level with his. She firmly says she's being serious and that she's only doing this because she doesn't want him to die. Looking at him with watery, puppy-like eyes, she asks if he thinks she's acting strange, tears starting to form. The moment he sees her cry, he panics and comforts her, quickly saying she's not weird at all. She then calmly explains that without better armor, he could easily lose his life, and in his panic, he blurts out that he'll buy it. In the end, he purchases a centipede protector for 50,000 yen, a silver wolf dagger for 98,000 yen, and a strange mask for 500 yen, spending a total of 148,500 yen. Carrying his bag, he leaves the weapon shop as the girl cheerfully thanks him for his purchase. The moment he's gone, she quietly celebrates to herself, as Yuyujuki Aken Ikabishi, the shop clerk, realizes she has somehow met her daily sales quota, something she had been struggling with. She thinks about the odd mask filled with bad miasma that never sells, noting that it wasn't even a magic item, yet she still managed to get rid of it. Feeling proud of how easy it was to sell him so many items, she becomes excited and already plans to brag to the clerk at the neighboring shop. Then, a troubling thought crosses her mind, as the silver wolf dagger he bought shouldn't be usable by anyone below the middle levels, since silver wolves only appear on dungeon floors 6 through 8, and their fangs are normally crafted into high-quality weapons meant for mid-level adventurers. For a brief moment, she wonders why the man called himself a beginner, but quickly drops the thought since she doesn't really care about him. Meanwhile, Karaboshi is still stunned by how much money he just spent. When he returns to the underground floors of Chikaho, after experiencing the true dungeon inside his own garage, he can't understand why so many people still come here. The dungeon is packed with both men and women, and while adventurers usually have to fight each other for monsters on the first and second floors, today somehow feels different to him. He quietly promises himself that one day, he will reach the deepest level of this dungeon. Checking his status screen, he sees that it has updated just as he expected, now listing the second floor as the deepest he has reached and showing that he gained 1 skill point. He assumes skill points can't be earned outside of dungeons, or maybe the conditions there are simply too easy. Remembering how he once struggled to kill a centipede with a single strike, he wonders if it would still be difficult now, or if the dagger's performance made the difference. With those thoughts in mind, he prepares to head deeper, knowing that from this point on there will be fewer people and more monsters. Just as he's thinking that, a killer rabbit suddenly rushes at him with terrifying force, strong enough to injure him if not for his new armor. Killer rabbits are known as brutal monsters, using their powerful legs to move at unbelievable speeds. According to online information, only the meat and horns of male killer rabbits sell for high prices. He can clearly tell this monster is far more dangerous than the centipedes, and he feels its intense killing intent, which strangely excites him. He slashes at it with his dagger, but the rabbit immediately attacks again, barely slowing down at all. He strikes the rabbit again, knocking it into the air as it rushes back at him at full speed with its claws out. But this time Karaboshi is fully prepared. He slices it while it's airborne and finishes it off once it hits the ground, killing it for good. Breathing hard, he collapses, stunned that he actually won the fight. Moments later, other adventurers arrive and look around in confusion, finding the rabbit already dead and wondering who defeated it. When Karaboshi admits it was him, they stare in shock, unable to believe someone acted faster than they did. As he tries to stand, his body starts shaking, and he realizes the rabbit's speed and killing intent scared him more than he noticed at first. Nearby, the adventurers whisper to each other, saying it should have been killed quicker, arguing about fault, and warning that a monster parade is coming. Confused by their words, Karaboshi watches them abandon the drop and run off in one direction, while he chooses to sprint the opposite way. At the same time, deep inside the Chikaho dungeon, a girl stands around uncertainly when a few adventurers call out to her, asking if she is Karen-chan. Startled, she politely confirms, and the three men exchange confused looks, saying they found her through Naru's recruitment forum and expected something completely different. Karen bows and says she looks forward to working with them today, and they return the greeting, introducing themselves as Lars, Shikama, and Haria. Without hesitation, Shikama asks her age, and she calmly answers that she is 18. Haria comments that Karen only just reached the minimum age to join, making Lars frown as he says he doesn't like how young she is and worries she might not be dependable. He jokes that even so, it's still better than being stuck alone with the newbie Shikama, and Haria adds that at least it's not a naked Shikama running around with just a blade. Karen doesn't find the joke funny and instead focuses on checking her equipment. Shikama then says they should move out, suggesting that since Karen is new, she shouldn't overdo it and should simply follow their lead. With determination, she agrees confidently, and Shikama reassures her that it won't be too hard since they usually operate below the 9th floor and can reach it quickly. However, as they travel through the dungeon floors, Karen starts struggling to keep pace, and Shikama ends up supporting her to help her move forward. Haria points out that she looks completely exhausted, and Lars says he's not surprised, since she's a beginner after all. Karen begins doubting herself, as just fighting monsters on that floor makes her feel level-up sickness, causing her to question whether she can really continue. When Shikama tries to help her sit down and tells her to rest for a moment, she refuses and insists she's fine now and wants to keep going. He tries to encourage her by saying he thinks she's very brave. Lars then comments that most female adventurers usually just mess around on the 1st and 2nd floors, adding that it's actually because the lower floors are more dangerous. Suddenly, Haria presses his ear against the wall and hears something, and when Lars asks if it's close, Haria answers that it's still far but getting closer. Sensing something is wrong, Karen asks what they plan to do, but as she sits on the ground trying to catch her breath, they simply reply that the answer is obvious, they're going to run. All of them suddenly broke into a run, leaving Karen confused and scared, unable to understand why they were fleeing or what was happening. As they ran, Shikama shouted that a monster parade was coming, explaining that it was a massive movement of monsters inside the dungeon. The reasons for it can differ, but according to what adventurers learn online, the correct response is to retreat immediately when one occurs. Karen tried to stand and follow them, but the noise behind her grew louder with every second, making it clear the parade was already closed. Countless monsters were charging toward them, and she could see the other three getting farther ahead, leaving her behind. Realizing she had no choice, she yelled for them to wait, but they only looked back briefly and shouted at her to hurry up, calling her a reckless newbie. The three started arguing as they ran, with Shikama insisting that he wouldn't be a real man if he abandoned her, while Lars and Haria angrily disagreed, saying that stopping would get them caught by the parade and killed. Still confused and terrified, Karen struggled to catch up, when suddenly, they all stopped at once. Shikama stepped forward and raised his shield, and seeing this, Karen felt a rush of relief, believing they were about to fight and protect her. Feeling grateful to be with experienced adventurers, she moved behind them, thinking it would be safer not to interfere. In the next instant, everything went wrong, as Shikama slammed his shield into her, shoving her straight toward the oncoming monsters. She hit the ground hard and couldn't move, and as she lay there, Shikama coldly apologized and told her she would serve as a decoy. Through her blurred vision, she watched the three of them turn and run, escaping deeper into the dungeon. She tried to call out and stop them, but it was already too late, as the monster parade reached her and the heavy footsteps of killer rabbits closed in. Tears streamed down her face as fear took over, and she screamed for someone to save her, not wanting to die. Hearing her cry rise above the roar of the monster parade, Karaboshi sprinted toward the sound and arrived just as the monsters were about to strike a young girl, surrounded on all sides by killer rabbits. Without hesitation, he prepared to fight, quickly checking his screen and assigning his remaining points, knowing even a slight boost in strength could make a difference. His rank shifted from H to G as the rabbit's claws came dangerously close to her face. Wearing the strange mask and gripping his dagger, Karaboshi slashed through the rabbits, blood spraying everywhere, even across Karen's face. With his new armor and mask, he tore through the monster parade in every direction, striking again and again, and although his strength only increased by 1 point, the change felt overwhelming. His body burned, nausea rose in his stomach, and his head pounded, but the thrill was intense, making him realize this was the true feeling of adventuring. Finally stopping to catch his breath, he saw the rabbits scattered across the ground, and as he sighed in relief, he heard the girl stand up behind him. When he turned around, she froze at the sight of his mask, apologized awkwardly, and before he could react, she grabbed his hand and thanked him for saving her life. Unable to speak properly, he muttered that it was nothing, yet as she held on and confessed she truly believed she was going to die, Karaboshi felt her warmth and knew he was genuinely glad he had been able to save her. Together, they gathered the horns and meat from the killer rabbits, and he thanked her for helping collect the materials. She introduced herself as Karen Kurosaki, and he responded by giving his name, Haruki Karaboshi. She then asked if he planned to keep wearing the mask, and after finishing their packing, they got ready to leave the dungeon. Karen offered to carry part of the load, and he hesitated for a moment before asking if she was really okay with that. As they walked toward the exit, she asked if Haruki was a Sapporo ranker, but he corrected her through the mask, saying he was only a beginner. She suddenly stopped walking, shocked by his answer. If he was just a beginner, then why would he rush straight into a monster parade? He replied that he had acted on impulse, without really thinking. Karen was stunned by his response, and Karaboshi himself was even more amazed, knowing it was all thanks to the skill board. He couldn't believe that, despite being a beginner, he had charged into a monster parade and survived. He then mentioned that he had passed a group of 3 men while running toward the danger and asked if she knew them. Her face darkened as she explained that those men had recruited her through the Naru website, and she believed they would help her grow stronger. Her words trailed off, and he immediately understood. An adventurer's duty is to protect others, and he could not forgive those who acted selfishly or abandoned the weak. While there are moments when leaving someone behind is unavoidable, those 3 had not hesitated even once, caring only about escaping. Lars had demanded they run right away, and Haria had seen Karen as nothing more than bait, and in Karaboshi's eyes, people like that were unforgivable. At the Adventurers Guild, Yuyujuki Akane from the weapon shop was chatting with a guild clerk behind the counter. She was pushing the clerk to review her shop's income report, repeatedly pointing out the comparison with last year. The profits had jumped to 200%, and she made sure to emphasize that number again and again. With a smug smile, she then asked if the clerk's branch was doing just as well. The woman snapped back, telling Yuyujuki to stop bragging because it was getting annoying. Even though they were both branch managers, the clerk was Yuyujuki's senior, and Yuyujuki was expected to show more respect. Yuyujuki fired back, saying seniority based only on years didn't matter anymore, and that results were what truly counted. Comparing herself, a young and attractive woman with outstanding results, to the older and average clerk, she claimed the difference was obvious at a glance. The clerk stood there in shock, wondering who Yuyujuki was calling old. Just then, someone entered the guild and apologized for interrupting. Both women instantly switched expressions and greeted the customer warmly. When they turned around, they froze in disbelief. A man wearing a strange mask stood there, carrying a large pile of killer rabbit horns, with a small girl following behind him. The moment Yuyujuki recognized the mask, she quickly ducked behind the counter. Karaboshi spoke calmly, saying he wanted to sell the horns and asking for an appraisal. A chill ran through Yuyujuki as she wondered if this masked man was the same customer from her shop earlier. Karaboshi and Karen stepped up to the counter and poured the horns onto the table, prompting the clerk to ask if they were killer rabbit horns. Karen nodded and confirmed it, adding that there should be about 100 horns in total. Both clerks froze in shock at the overwhelming amount. Yuyujuki immediately felt something was off, since killer rabbits were dangerous monsters that beginners normally couldn't defeat. Taking down 100 of them in just one afternoon was far beyond what a bronze-level beginner should be capable of. On top of that, female killer rabbits didn't have horns, meaning even more monsters may have been killed. Doing all of this alone was clearly unnatural. After a short wait, the clerk thanked them and announced the appraisal results, stating that 101 killer rabbit horns were worth 202,000 yen. She carefully checked the receipt again to make sure everything was correct, and Karaboshi calmly agreed to the amount. The clerk then asked if he wanted to use the team division option, and when he admitted he didn't know what it was, she explained that it allowed the money to be split and deposited separately, while also granting bonus service points. After listening, he agreed to use it. At that moment, Karen's eyes filled with tears as she protested, saying it wasn't fair since she hadn't really done anything. He insisted that helping carry the horns still counted, but Karen argued that she hadn't fought at all. He then suggested that since she carried 48 horns, she should be paid for that portion. Hearing this, Yuyujuki realized the truth, that this man had defeated all those killer rabbits by himself. The clerk apologized and explained that it wasn't possible to calculate payment for exactly 48 horns. Yuyujuki suddenly cut in, grabbed the clerk's arm, and pulled her down behind the counter. Karaboshi noticed the sudden movement, while Yuyujuki demanded to know why the clerk couldn't simply redo the appraisal properly. The clerk nervously explained that reappraising would require overtime work, which was strictly limited, and she didn't want to risk angering her superiors. Yuyujuki clicked her tongue at the excuse, calling it foolish and saying that this kind of thinking was exactly why the clerk would always be slow, no matter how much time passed. Offended, the clerk snapped back and demanded to know what Yuyujuki meant by that. By then, Yuyujuki had already straightened up, apologized politely to the customers, and asked them to wait just a moment. She quickly punched numbers into the calculator, working at full speed, then handed out 2 cards. Thanking them for their patience, she explained that the payment had been adjusted, with one portion equal to the value of 53 horns, plus half the value of the remaining 48 horns, and that the money would be deposited separately into each account. Karaboshi and Karen both thanked her and left the guild together. As they walked away, Karaboshi became certain that this woman was the same clerk from the weapon shop earlier that day. Left behind, the guild clerk angrily demanded to know what Yuyujuki thought she was doing and insisted on an explanation. Yuyujuki shot back that this was an important customer, and while she normally followed the boss's rules, it was fine to ignore half of them when the person bringing in the money was standing right there. The clerk argued that Yuyujuki was being incredibly rude to both the boss and the customer and declared she would report everything Yuyujuki had done that day to their superior. Yuyujuki replied that she didn't care at all and said that someday, the clerk would end up thanking her. The clerk could only stare in disbelief at how Yuyujuki always managed to talk back. As they reached the car and Karaboshi prepared to head out, Karen suddenly stopped him and asked how she could repay him. Confused, he said it wasn't necessary, explaining that all he did was save her, nothing more. Still, she insisted, saying she truly wanted to show her gratitude and that if there was anything at all she could give him, no matter what it was, she wanted to do it. He didn't really understand what she meant, but he was sure she had no bad intentions, only pure gratitude. Even so, from a social standpoint, a 27-year-old man being involved with an 18-year-old girl could easily cause serious misunderstandings. Wanting to avoid any trouble, he quickly got into his car, told her not to worry about repaying him, and drove off in a hurry. When he reached his building and entered the hotel, the exhaustion hit him all at once, and he realized he probably wouldn't have been able to drive any farther if he had stayed longer. He dropped onto his bed and only then noticed that he had been wearing the mask the entire time. His mind drifted back to the moment he entered the hotel and passed the receptionist, realizing he must have scared them with the strange mask and the odd way he had been moving around. Yet while wearing it, he hadn't felt anxious at all, almost as if he were inside a dream. It felt like he had no presence, as thin as air, and yet he still clearly existed within other people's sight, making him suspect the mask might be some kind of godlike item. Later, at the rough-looking tavern, Karaboshi felt excited that he had finally reached the famous spot often mentioned on the Naru website. He lifted his mug and noted that even a medium drink cost 2,000 yen, but decided that today deserved to be treated as a special occasion. While he was lost in thought, Another customer accidentally bumped into him while ordering, splashing Karaboshi's drink all over his face. The man didn't even notice, assuming he had hit a wall instead of a person. His friend started to explain that he had seen it happen, and had already warned him about some creepy guy wearing a strange mask, and the other agreed, saying he had noticed him too, clearly talking about the masked man with the dagger, and remarking that from head to toe, he looked exactly like a complete beginner. The first man agreed, saying the mask was ugly and outdated, and that he only wore something like that because he was a nobody. Karaboshi overheard them and felt shocked that people had actually noticed him, and were even talking about him. To him, that alone felt amazing. He suddenly stood up, lifted his mug high, and felt like he had gone from being invisible to truly existing. With new confidence, he ordered another beer. The people nearby jumped in surprise, realizing they hadn't noticed him there before. A waitress came over with the drink, and he took the mug from her hand and greeted her politely. After finishing, he decided it was time to head back to the hotel. Once there, he opened his laptop and started writing a blog post about the Monster Parade incident. He felt sure that today's story was strong and would finally get some reactions. Only then did he remember that the girl he saved had mentioned she also wrote a blog. Curious, he searched and found her post titled "I Was Saved." In it, she wrote that she would never forgive the adventurers who abandoned her and poured out her gratitude toward Karaboshi. When he checked her blog stats, he saw that 143 people had already bookmarked it. Feeling tired, he closed his laptop and went to bed. While he slept, many readers found his own blog, leaving comments accusing him of lying and saying there was no way he could have survived a Monster Parade suicide charge. Others guessed that Air might be his blogger name and decided to bookmark him, with more people agreeing and doing the same. When he woke up the next morning, he saw that his blog had 5 views and 3 bookmarks. He was filled with joy, because it was the very first time anyone had ever bookmarked his blog. At last, he truly felt seen. He started packing his things, planning to head home, and thought about returning to the garage dungeon to level up again. But then he realized that going straight home might be dangerous, since the 3 adventurers from before could try to harm the girl. Instead, he chose to go meet her. When he arrived at the dungeon area, it was packed with people, and he thought it would have been smarter to send her a direct message, because finding her in such a crowd seemed impossible. Just then, he heard someone calling his name. Karen waved happily and greeted him with a bright good morning. He replied and asked how she managed to find him, shocked because, despite his weak presence, this was the first time anyone had ever called out to him by name. She laughed and said it was because of his mask, which stood out so much. Only then did he realize he had forgotten he was still wearing it. She lightly touched the mask and said it was incredible, joking that for a god-like item that only cost 500 yen, the shop clerk must be a goddess. Noticing how uneasy he looked, Karen asked if something was wrong, and he admitted he had been worried about the men from yesterday. As he spoke, the 3 adventurers suddenly approached them, and only then noticed the masked man. Karaboshi quietly asked Karen if those were the same men, and she confirmed it. He told her to stay where she was, suspecting that the 3 had come to check if she was dead, and if she was alive, they might threaten her or even try to kill her to stop her from spreading a bad story. Actions like that could get adventurers disqualified. As these thoughts rushed through his mind, the 3 men suddenly charged at him, ready to fight, and he couldn't believe they would attack so openly in such a crowded place, especially with a young girl right there. He judged the situation in a split second. If he dodged Shikama's shield, Harria's arrow would come next, and even if he survived that, Lars was waiting with his heavy sword. As they rushed closer, he stayed calm and focused, trying to find a way to escape their combined attack. Just as a blade flew toward his chest, ready to stab him, another sword suddenly cut in between. Shikama's weapon shattered on impact, and the force knocked him flat to the ground, completely stunned. "What's with all this noise?" the man holding the sword asked. Both Karen and Karaboshi recognized him immediately. It was Masatsugu. The crowd exploded with excitement at his appearance, and Karaboshi was shocked, realizing he hadn't seen Masatsugu move at all. Shikama quickly tried to explain, claiming that it was actually Karaboshi and Karen who caused the trouble, saying they had been pushed into a monster parade and almost died. Karaboshi saw through the lie right away and understood the tactic he was using. The people around them began to whisper, because abandoning someone to a monster parade was completely unforgivable. Masatsugu calmly asked Karen and Karaboshi if Shikama's story was true. Karaboshi answered that it wasn't and pointed to Karen, explaining that the 3 men had entered the dungeon with her to train her, but when a monster parade appeared, they ran and used her as bait. Karen lowered her head as tears filled her eyes. After listening, Masatsugu said it was truly a terrible situation. The three adventurers shouted back, demanding to know why he would believe a man wearing such a strange mask when their lives were supposedly in danger. Masatsugu faced the three men and said calmly that he believed none of their words. The moment they pointed their weapons at other people, they had already lost all trust. Shikama tried to argue back, asking how Masatsugu could judge them just by seeing their weapons, claiming it was all done in self-defense. Right then, the police arrived and asked what was going on, and the three adventurers immediately panicked, unable to stay composed. Even the officers recognized Masatsugu, with one of them admitting he was a fan. Karaboshi realized that even the police admired him and felt relieved that the situation was now in their hands. Standing a short distance away, Karen asked Karaboshi if everything was finally over and whether it had worked out. While they waited, Masatsugu explained the situation to the police, and Karaboshi thought that if things truly ended here, it would be for the best. Without asking further questions, the police took the three adventurers away, leaving the final judgment to Masatsugu since no official complaints had been filed. As they were being let off, Masatsugu turned toward Karaboshi and asked for his name. After a brief pause, Karaboshi introduced himself as Haruki Karaboshi and added that his name on Naru was Air. Masatsugu smiled and casually said that he was quite strong, wasn't he? Karaboshi froze, unsure why Masatsugu said that so suddenly, and couldn't tell whether it was praise or a warning. Masatsugu went on, saying that even now, Karaboshi was hiding his presence, and after spending so long lurking in dungeons, it had become a habit. Karaboshi quietly admitted to himself that it was true, and in his heart, he wanted to thank Masatsugu for being the one who noticed. Masatsugu continued, saying that out of everyone he had ever met, Karaboshi was the one who erased his presence the most, and that it was an unbelievable ability. He stared straight into Karaboshi's eyes through the mask, then leaned in and quietly told him that it would be best if he stayed away from the city for a while. Karaboshi asked if that meant there was a danger of someone trying to assassinate him. Masatsugu answered honestly that such a risk did exist, and until things settled down, he would deal with those men himself. Karaboshi immediately objected, saying there was no way he could burden him with something like that. Masatsugu frowned and explained that if people started believing this kind of behavior was normal for adventurers, everyone would suffer because of it. He added that even he would find it annoying to be linked to people like them, casting the men a sharp, cold glance. Seeing that harsh expression was unexpected and revealed a side of Masatsugu few ever saw. He then reassured Karaboshi that he would be staying in Riihoro for some time. Karaboshi asked if it was really okay to leave everything to him, and Masatsugu calmly said it was. He added that those men were rotten to the core, and that he was handling this for his own reasons, telling Karaboshi to remember that. Karaboshi nodded and said he understood. As the crowd erupted, shouting for autographs, Masatsugu grabbed Shikama by the collar and dragged him away. Karaboshi quietly slipped off to the side and opened his screen, checking another person's status for the first time, especially that of a top-ranked adventurer. Chances like this were rare, so he wanted to use it as a reference, but the moment he saw the overwhelming numbers displayed, he realized there was nothing he could possibly learn from it. Masatsugu held in a rank simply because he was one of the highest-ranked adventurers, and on top of that, he possessed divine protection known as Shikigami. Having divine protection meant receiving a revelation directly from God. Karaboshi wanted to learn more about the holy sword he saw, but the status window suddenly disappeared as Masatsugu moved out of range. Even so, Karaboshi could still view the skill tree paths, and he was curious to study the holy sword's details later. Just then, Karen pushed her way through the crowd and asked him to take her to a dungeon. Caught off guard, he asked what she meant, and she explained that since Masatsugu had warned him not to stay in the city, she felt she shouldn't remain there either. She then asked him to bring her to the dungeon at his home. Karaboshi was stunned and asked how she even knew about it. Karen smiled and said that after he told her his alias was Air, she searched his blog and realized he was the same person who wrote about a dungeon appearing in his garage. He was completely surprised. She added that she regularly read new posts on the site whenever she had free time. Realizing that one of his very few readers was standing right in front of him gave him a strange, rare feeling. She urged him to hurry, saying she was ready to go with him right away. He tried to warn her that his hometown had nothing special, but she calmly replied that it still had a dungeon, didn't it? He agreed, then mentioned that it was deep in the countryside and staying out late might worry her parents. Without hesitation, she said it would be fine. Though he couldn't understand her determination, he agreed. They got into his car and headed toward the dungeon in his garage, and he tried to steady his thoughts, reminding himself that she was an adventurer who had already made her choice. Her life was built around fighting with everything she had, much like his own, so she likely understood the fear of losing something precious. During the drive, she happily watched the scenery pass by the window, but as time went on, she started to notice just how isolated the countryside really was. When they arrived at his house, she stared in amazement at the barricades set up around the dungeon entrance in his garage. She confirmed that there truly was a dungeon inside and even commented that having one at home sounded convenient. He agreed, though his reply lacked enthusiasm. She then asked where the town's trading store was, and he explained that there wasn't one because the area was so remote. Shocked, she asked if there wasn't even a weapon shop, but he quickly stopped her, telling her not to look at him like that or ask any more questions, explaining that online shopping had wiped everything out. Even so, she stayed optimistic, believing that now a dungeon had appeared, the town would surely improve. He then asked if she was ready to go inside. As they walked down the dungeon stairs, he asked if she knew what kind of monsters lived there, and she answered that they were centipedes, which he agreed with, noting that she must have read his blog. He told her that her life wouldn't be in danger, but warned that the monsters could damage her armor, so she needed to stay alert. She nodded in understanding. He then noticed that her armor was little more than regular clothing, and the stick she carried wasn't a wand but a root staff. She wore leather boots, and root staffs, made from monster materials, were known to be unpopular in dungeons because they were hard to use, usually considered B-class beginner weapons. He couldn't understand why she chose such a weapon, which only made her choice more intriguing to him. He decided to ask her about it later if the chance came up. All of a sudden, a centipede monster crawled into view, and her heart started pounding with fear. She was clearly terrified. He calmly told her it was fine and explained that centipedes weren't very strong, but she shot back that her heart definitely didn't feel fine. Trying to support her, he said that since this was such a rare chance, she should try attacking it herself. She froze in place, staring at the centipede. Seeing this, he stepped forward, pressed his foot down on the monster to stop it from moving, and pointed out that its weak spot was the head. Panicking, she asked how he could stay so calm, and whether he wasn't disgusted at all. He answered honestly that he actually found them kind of cute, saying the way their legs moved and bodies wriggled made them adorable to him. She couldn't even bring herself to look and begged him to kill it quickly, saying she would get goosebumps just thinking about it. He warned her that the centipede's eyes were dangerous, and if she turned away in disgust, she could die. Then he asked her a hard question: was she a girl who feared gross things, or an adventurer who could face reality head-on? Those words struck deep. She tightened her grip on her staff, stepped forward, and smashed the centipede's head. The very next second, she started vomiting. He remarked that level-up sickness was truly awful. While he collected the centipede's hard shell, she asked how long he had been an adventurer. He answered that he had only started that year, which shocked her, since she had also begun in the same year. He confirmed it was true, and when she asked if he had been into martial arts before, he replied that he hadn't, explaining that back in school, he only did track and field and nothing else. After he started working, he realized his company was a harsh black company, and hearing that, she wondered how he had grown so strong while she still felt so weak. He helped her back to her feet and told her that since his house was close by, she could hunt as much as she wanted, explaining that if she kept defeating monsters little by little, she would naturally become stronger. She replied with determination that she would wipe out every monster, but he gently told her she didn't need to push herself that far. A few days passed, and she became much better at landing hits on centipedes, and after another kill, he guessed it was around her 100th one. He told her it was still dangerous to fight alone, and the fact that she could do it showed how fast she was improving. Gasping for breath, she apologized and said she needed a break, and he agreed, suggesting they rest. She collapsed onto the ground, completely worn out, and he found himself impressed by her effort. She hadn't complained even once, showing strong grit and never slacking off, qualities that would surely help her later on. He opened her skill board and saw she still had no points and remained at rank H. But then something caught his eye and shocked him. While Karen lay there, wondering what she would do if centipedes appeared in her dreams, he kept reading and noticed the words, magic power. He froze in disbelief, since there was still no public information about magic. And this was the exact skill veteran adventurers had been waiting for. His curiosity surged, and he wanted to know more, to see it, and to understand it. But it was clear she was hiding her magic power on purpose, avoiding using it. Aside from that, the rest of her skill board looked almost identical to his. Beginner adventurers like them had no real way to protect themselves from bad intentions, and revealing unknown abilities was extremely risky. Because of that, he decided to ask in a careful and indirect way. Casually, he asked Karen if it might be possible that she could use magic. The moment he said it, her expression hardened, and she frowned, asking why he would even bring that up. Realizing he might have gone too far, he quickly tried to cover it up, saying he only thought so because her outfit looked like something a magical girl might wear. She replied bluntly that magical girls wore dresses. Feeling awkward, he added that if magical weapons existed, then magic skills must exist too, right? Explaining that he had just been thinking about it for a while out of curiosity. She responded that even if someone could use magic, they wouldn't reveal it unless they were a high-level adventurer. When he asked why, she answered simply that it was dangerous. Karaboshi understood immediately that she was protecting herself and that she was fully aware of how risky her magic power could be. He glanced back at her screen and noticed she had 3 unused points. He wasn't sure whether that was good or bad, but since it was something he himself didn't have, he felt that her magic power combined with those points might be part of her fate. Without hesitation, he put all 3 points into magic power. Karen looked at him in confusion, not understanding what he had just done. Suddenly, strange noises began echoing around them, shaking the area like a small earthquake. She said she had a bad feeling and suggested they leave the dungeon, and as they started moving, he added that it felt like something was breaking. Fear spread across her face as she asked what they would do if it turned out to be a centipede monster parade. He tried to reassure her, explaining that centipedes weren't very dangerous one by one, but when they gathered in large numbers, they could become a serious threat. As they continued forward, a massive centipede suddenly crawled out from the direction of the 8th floor, radiating far greater killing power. This one was poisonous, incredibly fast, and had an extremely sharp sense of smell, leaving him confused about why such a monster was on the 1st floor. Giant centipedes weren't supposed to appear here at all, as they were rare mutant creatures, sometimes even stronger than dungeon bosses. The monster rushed toward them at terrifying speed, and he shouted for Karen to fall back and stay alert for attacks from behind. Drawing his dagger, he tried to strike first, but the centipede ignored him and lunged straight for Karen. He aimed for its head, but even that part was unbelievably tough, and his attacks couldn't break through its shell. As the centipede turned toward him to counterattack, Karen slammed her staff onto its head, and with the help of magic, she forced it back, stopping the attack and killing it on the spot. After leaving the dungeon, Karen looked up at the sunset with a cheerful smile and said how beautiful it was, making him realize it might have been the first time he had ever truly noticed a sunset like that. In the distance, they spotted a new building and walked closer, only to discover it was a weapon shop. He was stunned that a weapon shop had opened in such a remote area. Karen pointed out that it definitely hadn't been there before they entered the dungeon, yet now it suddenly stood there, which felt almost unreal. Karaboshi wondered just how strange that was, since shops usually only opened after careful checks of supply and demand, and this one even looked pre-built. Even so, he was glad it existed, and since they had just collected plenty of materials, he didn't hesitate and walked straight inside. From inside the shop, they could hear someone crying. Karaboshi called out, and soon they realized it was the same shop clerk from before. She greeted them, saying that even though the store was empty, they were welcome to browse. Karaboshi felt confused and wondered what exactly there was to look at. He asked if she was the same clerk who had worked at the Sapporo shop, and the moment he said that, she burst into even louder sobs. Both of them froze, unsure of how to react, as she cried uncontrollably and shouted about why she had been sent to a place like this. Seeing how upset she was, Karaboshi suggested leaving and coming back later, thinking she seemed completely different from before. However, just as they turned to go, she rushed over and stopped them, demanding to know how he could walk away while a woman was crying right in front of him. Karaboshi noticed how quick and agile she was. They sat down across from her and listened as she poured out her story. She said she had worked so hard for the company and felt this was nothing but harassment, asking if it wasn't cruel. Both of them nodded in agreement. Despite increasing sales, she explained that just because she had bought materials from another store without permission, she was punished like this. Carefully, Karaboshi asked if she had been demoted, which only made her cry harder as she begged him not to say that word. Feeling awkward, he offered the hard centipede shells and asked if she would buy them. She snapped back angrily, saying that being sent to the middle of nowhere didn't mean she had become useless. Karaboshi felt confused, wondering why it felt like she was arguing with him. She then inspected the materials, counting 96 hard centipede shells at 1,000 yen each, and when she looked at the giant centipede shells, she asked if they were really sure they wanted to sell those as well. He asked what she meant, and she explained that armor made from giant centipede shells would be far better than the gear he was using now. Since he already had the materials, crafting it would be cheaper than buying new armor. Even so, he insisted on selling them, explaining that he barely survived the fight earlier that day. He remembered how the wolf dagger had rejected him before and worried that if his level was still too low, powerful equipment might refuse him again. If he wanted to use gear like that, he felt he needed to grow stronger first. She suggested keeping 2 pieces and selling the rest, just in case he needed them later, and he agreed, thinking she really was capable despite how much she complained about herself. She calculated the total, valuing 8 giant shells at 40,000 yen, and when combined with the hard centipede shells, the final amount came to 138,000 yen. He then asked to split the money evenly. Karen objected, saying he deserved more, but he replied that she helped defeat the centipede. Karen argued back that she could only fight because of him. Yuyujuki grumbled that this was just like yesterday and told them to hurry up and decide. When he asked her to wait a moment, she snapped that they should stop wasting time. He then suggested that Karen take half for today, and in return, he would listen to something she wanted to talk about later. Yuyujuki kept muttering while moving items around, but eventually finished calculating the split. After that, he mentioned there was one more item he wanted appraised. She told him to take it out, and what appeared was something covered in centipede fluids that made Karen turn away in disgust. He explained it came from the centipede's stomach while he was collecting materials. Yuyujuki stared in shock, amazed that he had been carrying something like that so casually, while Karen couldn't even look at it. Yuyujuki then asked if he wanted a simple appraisal or a detailed one. She explained that a simple appraisal would take only 1 minute and cost 1,000 yen, while a detailed appraisal would be sent to headquarters, take up to a month, and cost 100,000 yen. She added that an item like this should normally be examined at Mitsubishi headquarters. Since it was already obvious what it was, he chose the simple appraisal. After carefully inspecting it, she paused, then congratulated him, saying there was no doubt it was a magic bag. The opening was small, meaning items larger than 20 centimeters couldn't fit, but the inside was as wide as a classroom. She asked if he wanted to sell it, and just as he was about to say no, she offered him 100 million yen. He froze in shock. She explained that transportation costs were insanely high these days, which made magic bags extremely valuable. Even so, he decided to keep it. When they returned to his house, Karen couldn't stop staring, amazed at how nice it was, and he invited her inside. She was impressed by everything, especially his computer, and he explained that his electricity was free thanks to solar panels. She said she was jealous, since most homes had strict electricity limits, and he agreed, mentioning how expensive things had become. He offered her a seat and poured them both some water. She looked at the glass with shining eyes and drank it all at once, seeming completely fascinated by it. When he asked if it tasted good, she smiled and said it was delicious, and he told her it came from a well. She then remembered that he had wanted to ask her something, and he nodded, asking if she used magic. She apologized for hiding it, and he replied that it made sense, since it could be dangerous if others found out. She agreed, and he added that adventurers should be free to enjoy themselves without being restricted. She stared at him and asked if he even had a brain. He answered that maybe he didn't have a brain, but he still wanted her to use magic. He explained that his dungeon was rarely visited, so she could practice magic freely there without worrying. The more she used it, the stronger she would become, and if she ever faced danger again, she could escape right away. Deep down, he also admitted to himself that he simply wanted to see her magic. She said she planned to start using it tomorrow, then hesitated and asked if she could try it now, quickly apologizing and explaining that magic was hard to use outside the dungeon. He asked when she first noticed she could use magic, and she said she wasn't really sure, only that while walking through the dungeon, she felt like she could use it, especially when holding her staff. He then asked why she chose a staff as her weapon, and she explained that magic flowed through it more easily. She confirmed that these were the questions he wanted to ask, and he nodded, adding that he had one more question, asking where she planned to stay that night. She replied casually that she would stay at his house. The water he was pouring almost spilled as he froze in shock. Meanwhile, Masatsugu was updating his blog titled "Cross the Dungeon with All Your Strength, Floor 132. As comments poured in, he began replying to his readers, many of whom asked whether he had defeated the floor boss and what the outcome was. He replied that he had beaten it and obtained some kind of rod, though its true nature was still under investigation. He then asked his followers if anyone knew the identity of the man in Sapporo. The replies said they had never seen him before, wondering if he might be the same person who survived the monster parade. They asked what made him so special and why Masatsugu was interested in him. Masatsugu answered that the man had sharp eyes and an exceptional ability to erase his presence. He felt that the man Masatsugu mentioned might be interesting, and the fans were shocked by that comment. It was rare for Masatsugu to call anyone interesting, so it made people wonder what kind of person that man really was. Back at Karaboshi's house, he carefully asked Karen again, thinking he might have misunderstood her. He asked where she said she was staying for the night, and she replied that she thought he had a spare room. He admitted that he did, and she happily announced that she would stay there. He was strongly against the idea. Karen tried to calm him down, saying it was fine and joking that she wouldn't even be surprised if his room was full of masks. There aren't any, he thought helplessly, realizing she really didn't understand. After all, she was still just an 18-year-old girl. He removed his mask, letting her see his face for the first time, and calmly explained their situation. She replied that this was his house, right? But he corrected her, saying that was only partly true. The dungeon entrance was right in front of it, and if another stampede happened, this house would be hit first. He was the only adventurer in the town, and if something happened to him, there would be no one to protect it. She pointed out that he was living alone anyway, and he agreed, but explained that adventurers must always stay alert. Their role is to protect others, and if there were two of them, one could watch the dungeon while the other stayed safe and ready in case of trouble. Treating it like part of the job, he suggested that she stay at the town hotel instead. She said she understood. In his mind, he felt relieved, knowing he had avoided trouble, since rumors spread incredibly fast in the countryside. Stories would grow 100 times bigger, and before he knew it, he could be labeled a criminal, something that could completely ruin a man's life. He explained that there was a hotel in town that cost 5,000 yen per night and told her he would take her there, and she thanked him for it. Over the next 3 days, Karen and Karaboshi hunted 100 centipedes each day, selling the materials every evening. Karen's growth was incredible, and soon she could fight 2 or even 3 centipedes at the same time. Her magic casting also improved greatly. As for Karaboshi, his dagger skills sharpened naturally, even though he hadn't spent any skill points on them, making it pure growth. A skill that improved simply by hunting monsters was extremely valuable. After Karen defeated another centipede, Karaboshi counted it as her 100th kill for the day, but she said she wasn't finished and could keep going. He suggested they stop for the day and rest tomorrow, and she asked if he had plans. He replied that he wanted to focus on leveling up himself. She apologized for making him support her instead of working on his own growth, but he told her there was no need to apologize and insisted she take a day off. She said she understood, but added that if he went deeper, she wanted to come too. He firmly told her to rest, joking that even God takes 1 day off each week, and though disappointed, she agreed. The next morning, Karaboshi felt excited, since it had been a long time since he had gone into the dungeon alone. He didn't want his own growth to slow down, and he knew rest was also part of an adventurer's job, helping the body prepare for emergencies. He moved past the centipedes on the first floor and the onion monsters on the second, reaching the third floor. It looked the same as before, and he wondered if he could push on to the fourth. Just as that thought crossed his mind, a black raccoon suddenly appeared. The black raccoon was a fast-moving monster with sharp, powerful claws, a type related to tanuki creatures. It attacked the moment it appeared. He swung his dagger, but the raccoon was incredibly quick, even faster than killer rabbits. Still, that didn't mean he couldn't fight it. Timing his moves, he aimed his dagger at its body while it was in the air, and once he got used to its patterns, he landed a clean hit. He kept hunting one raccoon after another, stopping only after defeating around 100 of them. By then, he had leveled up 6 times, and his bag was stuffed with tanuki meat, making him excited about cooking tanuki soup later. With the 3rd floor cleared, he headed toward the 4th. Near the entrance to the 4th floor, the floor boss appeared, a single black raccoon with no minions around it, making it a one-on-one battle. He tightened his grip on his dagger as the raccoon leaped at him, sending his adrenaline rushing. Closing the distance, he caught his reflection in the raccoon's eyes and stabbed, believing he had stopped it, but he was wrong. Its claws scraped against his armor, yet instead of fear, he felt excitement. Using his agility, he repositioned himself and drove his dagger straight into its head, defeating the boss. He placed his foot on the fallen body, feeling satisfied, when the dungeon suddenly began to glow. He remembered reading that this light appeared when a boss was defeated for the first time, and that a special item would drop. When he looked again, the raccoon's body had vanished, swallowed by the ground, leaving only his dagger stuck in the floor. Nearby, he spotted a raccoon claw and a strange metallic object that looked like iron, likely a boss drop, possibly real iron. Deciding to appraise it later, he moved on, and when he checked his screen, he noticed that his skill points hadn't changed. Feeling confused, he reread the rules and learned that entering a new lower floor for the first time grants 1 skill point, while defeating rare monsters also gives 1 point. However, killing bosses and normal monsters doesn't reward points, and skills can grow on their own without using points. As he kept reading, he noticed a new skill called Imitation had appeared on his skill board. This ability allowed him to copy the movements of enemies and was a combat skill that formed naturally. He was happy about it, but chose not to spend any points on it yet. Moving deeper into the 4th floor, he admired the scenery, filled with dark green shades mixed with lighter patches. He started thinking about what CMYK color ratios could create that shade and how hard it would be to make printing plates for it, before stopping himself and realizing it was just an old habit from his days working at a printing company. An occupational habit, he thought to himself. As he went on, he spotted a flower he recognized, but it suddenly grew quickly, opened its mouth, and launched something at him, a potato. His eyes widened in excitement. Onions, potatoes, and meat filled his thoughts, making him believe this dungeon was perfect. If he conquered it, he could eat rice and curry whenever he wanted. The flower fired nearly 40 potatoes before shrinking back down. Looking ahead, he saw many more of the same flowers and wondered if the 4th floor boss might be a giant potato. That thought was proven wrong when a 3-headed flower appeared, each head firing potatoes at once. He took cover behind a rock, figuring that even a boss couldn't have endless ammo, though seeing potatoes smash apart still felt like a waste. Without waiting any longer, he rushed forward and sliced the stem with his dagger, causing the boss to collapse. After collecting a huge pile of potatoes, he headed to the shop, where Yuyujuki was busy building furniture when he walked in. He asked if the shop was open, and she replied that it was closed. He said that was unfortunate and mentioned he would just head to Sapporo instead. Hearing that, she quickly told him to wait, saying that wasn't acceptable at all. He shot back that she should have treated customers properly from the start. He then laid out the black raccoon claws, meat, and iron on the counter. She stared at the pile and commented that he had killed an incredible number of monsters, and he casually replied that it was only about 100. She scolded him, asking if he had to kill at least that many to feel satisfied, and questioned whether he ever got tired from it all. He admitted that he was exhausted, which made her mutter that he must be crazy. Ignoring her remarks, he asked for the appraisal results. She picked up the boss's claw and the iron, explaining that the claw was simply a large claw good for making sword materials, but it wasn't something he could personally use and could be sold for 5,000 yen. As for the iron, she confirmed his guess, saying it was magic iron, often mixed with stronger materials and used for parts like fittings, and that the same material was already used in his dagger. It was valued at 100,000 yen per kilogram. When he showed her the potato-shaped items, she said they were just stones. Confused, he asked what they were used for, but she repeated that they were nothing more than rocks. He insisted they were boss drops, so she examined them again and explained that while they were hard and shaped like potatoes, their value was 0. He suggested that a detailed appraisal might reveal them to be magic tools. In response, she pulled out a jar and said it was an extremely rare magic item. His eyes lit up as he asked what it did, and she explained that anything placed inside would multiply endlessly, sometimes producing hundreds of kilograms. If gold were put in, it would create an infinite stream of gold. But because he had already used the jar to store stones, it now only kept producing stones, turning it into nothing more than a container that endlessly created trash. He felt crushed by the realization. At the same time, in her hotel room, Karen wondered what Karaboshi was doing. Was he pushing deeper into the dungeon on his own? Back at the shop, the magic jar continued spitting out stones non-stop, and as Yuyujuki watched the pile grow bigger and bigger, her frustration exploded. She snapped at him, saying she understood he was shocked, but he should at least act properly. Was he planning to fill the entire place with garbage? He stood there, still trying to accept that he had misused such an incredible magic item. Then, almost as an afterthought, he quietly asked how much the jar would have been worth if he had sold it instead. Yuyujuki answered instantly. As a super rare item, it would have sold for around 1 trillion yen. 1 trillion. Hearing that number shattered him even further. This time, the shock truly hit deep. Seeing his devastated expression, Yuyujuki tried to comfort him, saying that mistakes like this happen sometimes and that if he kept going, he might find something similar again someday. She also mentioned that new high-quality items would be arriving soon and told him to come back tomorrow. That night, he returned home and wrote a blog post about his dungeon run and the huge mistake he had made. The post got 4 views and 1 new like, but instead of feeling happy, he felt even more disappointed in himself. Why would someone like a post about such a failure? Why had he messed up so badly? Frustration burned inside him. The next morning, Karen arrived early at his house, greeting him brightly and saying she was ready to head into the dungeon. She asked if he had any plan for reaching the lower floors, and he replied that before anything else, they should stop by the armor shop. The shop clerk had mentioned earlier that new stock had arrived, so when they entered the store, they were surprised to see someone already inside. It was Kitora-san, Karaboshi's neighbor, and he seemed to be enjoying a friendly chat with Yuyujuki. Noticing the customers, Yuyujuki quickly apologized and asked him to leave for now, saying she had work to do. Kitora-san smiled warmly, said he understood, and told her to call him if anything came up. He left the shop still grinning. Once he was gone, Yuyujuki noticed Karen and asked why she was alone, wondering where Karaboshi was. Karaboshi calmly spoke up, saying he was standing right in front of her. She jumped in surprise, embarrassed that she had completely overlooked him, and complained about how often he used his presence erasing skill. He vaguely remembered how she used to notice him instantly before, but now she seemed far more relaxed around him. Suddenly, Yuyujuki clapped her hands and joked that they should hurry up and leave all their money with her, quickly correcting herself to say she meant buy everything she had. The shop display wasn't very flashy, just a few pieces of armor, boots, gloves, a short sword, and a rod. Both of them tried on the gloves, and Karaboshi noted that they fit tightly, had a great grip, and would make holding weapons much easier. He then picked up a pair of boots and asked if they were the right size, and Yuyujuki confidently replied that they were, explaining she had measured their footprints before ordering them. Karen looked impressed. Next, Yuyujuki showed them the short sword and the rod. When Karaboshi tried to lift the rod, it wouldn't move at all, meaning he couldn't use it. Yuyujuki looked slightly surprised, considering it was a dungeon drop, and when he asked if it was a powerful weapon, she admitted that even with her appraisal skills, the rod's true details were still unknown. So he asked if the item had basically been dumped there just to be sold. Yuyujuki explained that this shop was treated more like a storage warehouse than a real store. Karen tried on the boots and gloves and smiled, saying they fit perfectly, and Yuyujuki nodded proudly, saying of course they did. Karaboshi then asked Karen if she could lift the rod, and Yuyujuki smirked, asking if they would buy it if she could. He replied that it would depend on the price. Karen grabbed the rod and lifted it with ease, causing all 3 of them to freeze in shock. Karaboshi felt a small sting of jealousy, realizing she could equip a high-level weapon so easily. When he asked the price, Yuyujuki casually said 1 million yen, and the moment he heard that, he told Karen to put the rod down immediately. Yuyujuki protested, reminding him that he had said he would buy it if Karen could use it. He then demanded the real base price, warning that if she wasn't honest, they would take their business to Sapporo instead. Panicking, she begged them not to leave and reluctantly admitted the base price was 10,000 yen. He offered to buy it for 20,000 yen, but she argued that it was a drop from Chikaho's 20th floor and should be worth at least 50,000 yen. They went back and forth until Karaboshi suggested 30,000 yen, Yuyujuki countered with 40,000 yen, and they finally agreed on 35,000 yen. After that, Karaboshi picked up another dagger and noticed the blade wasn't sharp at all, asking if it even cut or if it was just junk. Yuyujuki calmly replied that it was a cursed dagger, and when he questioned how a dull blade could be cursed, she explained that although it wasn't sharp now, it grew sharper the more monsters it killed, making it a weapon that became stronger with use. He was stunned by how incredible the dagger was and couldn't understand why such a powerful item was sitting in a place like this. She answered bluntly that no one ever bought daggers, because most adventurers didn't even see them as proper weapons. She asked him straight out whether he was going to buy it or not. He hesitated, and the moment she noticed, Her attitude instantly changed back to her sweet sales tone as she urged him to take it. When he asked the price and heard it was 1 million yen, he immediately turned around to leave. She rushed to stop him, begging him not to go and quickly offering a discount. After some back and forth, they finally agreed on 300,000 yen. Karaboshi then asked if he could place a custom order as well. She said the shop had a basic ordering system and asked what he wanted. He requested a dismantling knife and medicine for adventurers. She asked about the knife's rank, and he replied that he trusted her judgment. She wrote everything down and casually added that if he ever needed anything else, he could tell her anytime. The wording confused him a bit, but he agreed anyway. Later, Karen and Karaboshi entered the dungeon together. On the 3rd floor, Karen asked if he had defeated the boss the day before, making him realize she must have read his blog. She then quietly asked if she had been a burden. He immediately denied it. She said she just wanted to become stronger as fast as possible, and he understood that feeling very well. The sense of being unnecessary, invisible, like air. He had felt the same way once. With that in mind, he declared that today they would hunt everything so she could grow stronger. Karen's face lit up with excitement. They fought black raccoons side by side using their new weapons, with Karaboshi taking the front and Karen attacking from behind using magic. Hunting alone was good, but fighting together felt completely different. When all the monsters were defeated, both of them were completely exhausted, and Karaboshi collapsed onto the ground. Karen warned him not to push himself until he dropped like that again. He apologized right away, then praised her, saying she had clearly become much stronger. She answered that the rod carried magic far better than her old weapon, but once again warned him to think about how reckless he had been. He promised her he would be more careful next time. As they continued forward, the ground suddenly shook. For a moment, he thought it was an earthquake, but the shaking stopped quickly. Karen guessed that things on the surface were probably fine. He suggested going back to hunting, but she snapped at him, asking if he hadn't reflected on a single thing she had just said. Later, they carried the day's loot to the shop and unloaded piles of black raccoon claws in front of Yuyujuki. She stared at the ridiculous amount in disbelief and irritation. 352 intact claws, he said calmly, while Karen happily pulled out even more from the magic bag. Yuyujuki was shocked, wondering just how much the bag could hold, but her mood only worsened as the pile grew. Karaboshi casually wondered out loud if, in 3 or 4 more days, he might earn back all the money he had spent there. Yuyujuki snapped, asking if they had some kind of personal grudge against her. He then mentioned the earlier tremor, but she said she hadn't felt anything at all. He explained that it had happened suddenly, without any warning. That same day, while Kidora-san, Karaboshi, and Karen enjoyed their meal together, completely unaware, dungeon stampedes were breaking out all across Japan. Early the next morning at 5 o'clock, Karaboshi heard strange sounds coming from the dungeon. He got out of bed, put on his armor, and grabbed his dagger before heading inside. As he prepared to descend, the noises grew louder and more chaotic, filling him with a bad feeling. Sensing danger, he called the city police station and reported that something very strange was happening inside the dungeon outside his house, urgently asking the authorities to come at once. The person on the other end said they understood and immediately contacted the defense forces, first confirming his identity. Haruki told them his name, Karaboshi Haruki, and that he was an adventurer. The caller advised him to follow all instructions given by the defense forces once they arrived. Haruki agreed and ended the call. Right after that, he dialed the hotel, apologizing for calling so early, but explaining that he needed to speak with a guest staying there. They connected him to Karen, who was still fast asleep in her bed. Startled by the ringing phone, she answered groggily, saying her name with her eyes still closed. The moment she heard Haruki's voice, her eyes snapped open. He told her to hurry, explaining that a stampede was happening and that she needed to get ready and come to his place immediately. Though clearly half asleep and shocked, she said she understood. As he hung up, he wondered if she would really be okay. Haruki stood near the barricades in front of his garage while checking the website, and just as he expected, access numbers had skyrocketed. Suddenly, Yuyujuki called out to him from the darkness, asking why he was awake so early and confirming that it was really Haruki. He asked her in return why she was up, wondering if she was already preparing the shop. She replied vaguely, saying it was something like that, and reminded him that she was a legendary shopkeeper after all. That was why she was checking purchase records early in the morning, and she was confident the medicines had arrived today. Haruki confirmed that they had, and immediately asked her to sell all of them to him. She thought it sounded good for business, but asked if something serious had happened to make him need so much. He answered honestly that it was probably because a stampede was occurring. Hearing that, Yuyujuki declared that she was getting out of there right now, but Haruki quickly stopped her. She protested, saying she wanted to leave because she didn't want to get caught up in any trouble. He calmly replied that trouble was exactly what this was, and reminded her that she was also an adventurer. Even if she tried to run away, they would eventually call her back to help. She argued that her residence papers hadn't been updated yet, so she thought she would be fine even if she didn't show up. Then added that she had never actually said she was an adventurer. He explained that he figured it out from the way she moved and the strength she showed. Even if she planned to leave, he said she could at least sell him the supplies first. She handed him a box filled with medicine. Meanwhile, Karen arrived out of breath, still half asleep and confused. She had heard about the stampede and the monsters and quickly asked if everyone was safe. He explained that stampedes were happening all over, but the monsters seemed to be emerging at different times in different places. While paying for the medicine at the shop, he told Karen that when the defense forces arrived, she should explain the situation to them, because he planned to enter the dungeon himself to defend the area. She was stunned, and he clarified that he intended to go inside and search for the boss. Karen immediately worried, saying that was far too dangerous, and even Yuyujuki agreed, saying it was reckless. He admitted there was a risk, that there might be too many monsters, and that what he was suggesting sounded foolish. Still, he explained that while the usual way to stop a stampede was to kill all the monsters, he believed there was another option, defeating the boss that was leading them. If he thought he could beat the boss, he would take that path instead of endlessly fighting monsters to protect the town. Karen then asked to go with him, but Karaboshi refused. When she demanded to know why, he answered honestly that she would only slow him down. He took off his mask and explained that his presence was unbelievably faint, allowing him to slip past monsters without being noticed. If Karen went with him, however, the monsters would sense her right away. She said she understood, but firmly warned him that he was not allowed to do something reckless like last time. Haruki agreed and promised he wouldn't. With that, he turned and headed into the dungeon. Yuyujuki noticed that he seemed to be humming as he left, and Karen agreed, thinking maybe he was. Outside, everything had fallen into chaos. Monsters were tearing through buildings and damaging the town as they pushed forward, while adventurers struggled to drive them back. Masatsugu stood at the front, giving orders and telling everyone to hold their formation and not let the monsters break through. He knew the defense force itself wasn't very strong, but there were many adventurers present, so he believed they could hold on somehow. When a group of monsters attacked ordinary women, Masatsugu stepped in, protected them, and told them to escape in the opposite direction because it was too dangerous there. In the middle of the chaos, he received a call from Bacon, who asked if things were under control and where Masatsugu was. Masatsugu replied that he was in Hokkaido. Bacon asked if the situation was bad, and Masatsugu answered that he was managing for now, but mid-level monsters had started to appear. "That sounds serious," Bacon said. Monsters were everywhere, and the entire area was in turmoil. Masatsugu asked where the other rankers were, and Bacon explained that most of the ones he could contact were already there helping, with only Shigeru away on an expedition. Bacon said he mainly wanted to know Masatsugu's location, but he was dealing with his own problems as well. Masatsugu told him he understood and promised to send 10 strong members to help. He reassured Bacon that the defense forces were almost there and told him to hold on until they arrived, and then the call ended. Masatsugu checked the blog again and felt there was still more he could do. Through the posts, people were already calling for help from the defense forces. Many ordinary citizens were commenting, saying the situation couldn't get any worse, joking that noodle factories might be destroyed. Another person complained about how anyone could worry about udon at a time like this, when lives were in danger. Masatsugu added a comment saying he was currently in Hokkaido. He explained that the situation there was stable for now, but warned everyone to stay alert, since there were enough people available for subjugation. His message drew even more replies. Someone said they would send support to Shinjuku, and Masatsugu asked everyone to lend their strength, even if it was only a little. After that, he set his device aside, ready to fight, and encouraged everyone to keep pushing forward to protect Japan. Meanwhile, Karaboshi finished gearing up and prepared to enter the dungeon. It felt like he was heading out on a midnight expedition. He checked his skill board and noticed he still had 2 points left, deciding to keep one as a backup and think carefully about where to place the other. monsters began rushing toward him all at once. Black raccoons, onion creatures, and centipedes flooding the area. Still, the situation wasn't too bad, since most of them hadn't noticed him at all. The only monsters that reacted were the silver wolves, likely because of their sharp sense of smell. He wondered if he could defeat them from a distance. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out the potato-like stones and started throwing them. He realized he could actually handle this, feeling glad that the potato stones were finally useful. Now able to focus on the silver wolves, he kept pelting them with stones, while the smaller monsters were held back by the defense line. He continued throwing stone after stone, until suddenly, something unexpected happened. He suddenly felt something strange spreading through his body, and when he looked ahead, he saw it, the boss, a massive silver wolf. He quickly realized it was a werewolf, a rare species and a dangerous mid-level monster. Instinctively, he turned and ran the other way, knowing there was no way he could win a direct fight. But the werewolf noticed him and immediately gave chase. In a flash, the creature leapt through the air and struck him, sending him flying and crashing to the ground. He was stunned by how sudden and powerful the attack was, yet he didn't freeze. The werewolf charged again, and Karaboshi barely managed to get back on his feet and slash at it with his dagger. Still, the monster recovered instantly, standing tall and aggressive while Karaboshi lay on the ground, unsure of what to do. The situation was clearly turning bad. Outside, the army had arrived to help, digging in and setting up stronger barricades to protect civilians. Karen was fighting off monsters pouring out of the dungeon, guarding the soldiers as they worked. 5 minutes had passed since the stampede began, yet only small monsters were emerging, and not in large numbers. With so many people present, things felt strangely manageable. A stampede this intense shouldn't have been so limited. Only weak monsters were appearing, which made it seem like something else was happening, possibly because of Karaboshi. Kitora-san rushed out and called to Karen, telling her not to get any closer because monsters were everywhere. She replied that he worried too much and reminded him that she was an adventurer too, seeing how everyone was giving their all. Karen realized he was right. She had been leveling up inside the dungeon all this time and was no longer someone who couldn't do anything. She had grown stronger. Spotting a killer rabbit attacking a worker, she rushed in and struck it down, then noticed another centipede farther away, trying to slip past the barricade. She decided to take down the centipede using magic from a distance, but several of them slipped out of her sight and began attacking civilians. Kitora-san rushed in to protect the people as the monsters drew closer. Just in time, Yuyujuki stepped in and struck down the centipedes. She sharply told Karen not to lose focus and to fix the barricade immediately. Karen then noticed one of the soldiers was injured and moved to help, but the shop clerk stopped her, warning her not to touch an open wound with bare hands. Was she trying to cause an infection? Karen shot back that if Yuyujuki had been helping defend the barricade instead of interfering, no one would have been hurt in the first place. Yuyujuki ignored her words and said she had no idea what Karen was talking about. Karen snapped back, telling her not to play dumb, and questioned why someone so strong fought in such a careless way. Yuyujuki arrogantly replied that Karen should stop blaming others for her own weakness and added that if she had time to argue, she should be treating the injured instead. Karen demanded to know why Yuyujuki wasn't fighting alongside everyone else, and Yuyujuki answered that she was protecting her shop, saying moments like this made her hate having a store outside the dungeon. One of the soldiers stepped in, saying that the young woman had a point, but if Yuyujuki was so bothered by it, she should get stronger before the next stampede. He then ordered everyone to brace themselves and not let a single monster through. Karen clenched her fists, filled with determination. Meanwhile, deep inside the dungeon, Karaboshi lay on the ground, unsure of what to do next. If he spent a point on agility, it still wouldn't be enough to win this fight. But if he escaped, the monster would break free, and someone else would die because he ran away, something he absolutely couldn't accept. With that thought, he forced himself back to his feet, regaining his strength. He looks at the werewolf and feels like it is smiling. It looks almost joyful, like someone who is truly enjoying the fight against him. He raises his dagger and barely manages to block the creature's claws. Heavy defense is all he can do right now. Still, he forces himself to stay focused, one attack at a time. Slowly, he starts to read its movements, noticing how its balance shifts and how its weight transfers. He feels miserable, and yet, at the same time, it is thrilling. It is fun. It feels incredible. Bit by bit, small openings appear. He realizes the next move will be a kick. He has learned the werewolf's attack pattern, but it is still far too fast. And now, he knows the next strike will finish him. He puts on his mask and spends his remaining point on imitation. In the next instant, he leaps into the air and unleashes a flurry of dagger strikes. He lands on the werewolf's back and keeps stabbing without stopping until the monster crashes to the ground. The werewolf is defeated. His body, however, is badly wounded. He thinks to himself that it was exciting, but he has reached his limit. He collapses onto the floor. His status screen shows that imitation has increased by 1 point. As he lies there, something heavy presses down on his stomach. It is Karen. She is crying. She had been searching everywhere and could not find him at all. She truly thought he had been eaten. He weakly asks what happened outside. She tells him it is over. The stampede has ended. Everyone survived. Across Japan, people are confirming it online. Naru announces that the stampede has stopped. Masatsugu reports that Sapporo is safe, but the situation in Shinjuku remains unknown. He tries to contact Bacon, but there is no response. Shinjuku has been destroyed. The soldiers gather the monster bodies into one place, talking among themselves. None of them understand why the stampede suddenly came to an end. According to the reports online, a stampede always ends once the boss is defeated. The soldiers are confused and start wondering who could have done it. Then they notice Karen emerging from the dungeon with Karaboshi behind her. The army completely ignores him and rushes toward Karen instead. They question her, asking if the stampede stopped right after she entered the dungeon. Did she defeat the boss herself? Karen tries to explain that it was not her, but Karaboshi. For a moment, he imagines everyone cheering for him, shouting his name, lifting him into the air like a hero. But reality is very different. No one even looks at him. Instead, they praise Karen, saying she must be the one, and that she is just being humble. They call her amazing and brave, especially for someone so small. As this happens, Karaboshi notices a change on his skill board. He cannot understand why people keep denying his existence. Is it some kind of rule of the world that prevents others from acknowledging him? A new skill has appeared on his screen, called Spy. It seems to have awakened on its own. Karen is quickly surrounded by people. Soldiers and civilians alike shower her with praise. Watching from the side, he feels a deep sense of sadness. Maybe he should just go home, he thinks. The crowd presses in around Karen, making her feel overwhelmed and trapped. She quietly says that she needs help. Hearing that, Karaboshi puts his mask back on, returns into the dungeon, and drags the massive body of the werewolf outside. He drops it right in front of everyone and clearly announces that he is the one who defeated the stampede boss. The crowd freezes in shock, wondering when someone like this had appeared. Yuyujuki stares at the enormous werewolf in disbelief and comments that she arrived at the perfect time, since she was planning to handle the dismantling herself. After that, she adds that she would also like to place a few orders using these materials. Hearing that, her eyes immediately shine with excitement. She hopes the order will be costly and quickly asks how much money he actually has. She wonders if he can really afford it, since she herself is barely getting by, and thinks this could be a win for her too. She then tells Karen to come along into the dungeon, saying she will need some extra help. Later, piles upon piles of monster bodies are scattered across the ground. The shop clerk stares in disbelief, wondering if this is some kind of joke because the number of monsters is way too much. Karaboshi then calmly says he has something else and reaches into his pocket. She freezes in fear, wondering what he could possibly pull out next. Instead, he shows a coupon he received when he became an adventurer, which gives him an extra 5% discount. Meanwhile, at Shinjuku Station, the reason for the failed stampede suppression becomes clear. Monsters had completely surrounded the area, and despite many powerful adventurers being present, they were defeated by a chain of bad luck. Masatsugu, Japan's strongest force, was absent. Monsters appeared at 63 locations at the same time, all of them mid-level, and Bacon, who was supposed to replace Masatsugu, suddenly vanished. News of the disaster spread across the country in an instant, plunging Japan into fear and despair. Faced with overwhelming danger, many adventurers ran to save themselves, and in the end, Shinjuku fell.